Today we're going to be talking about a really effective podcast framework and a podcast funnel, if you will, on this episode of Think Like a Strategist podcast.
I'm Zebulon Thomas, world-renowned videographer and GlideCam master operator turned strategist to the top 1% entrepreneurs. As a videographer, I've been responsible for generating millions of dollars in the commercial market by helping companies maximize their exposure with creative videos. With over a decade of experience, that has led to my own next level as a strategist. I've been called upon to serve people from all over the world. And yes, I still can't believe I get to do this. How fun. So I'm here to share my strategic secrets with you. Welcome to the Think Like a Strategist podcast.
I'm really excited because this is the first episode of season 3, episode 100, and I'm sharing with you guys with the all new setup, and I rebranded my podcast. Yes, we're back. But it's called Think Like a Strategist podcast. And I'm going to explain a little bit of that as we get into this season on why I switched this. But today I want to give you something really exciting. And that is, since we're talking about this podcast, I've been rebranding, a really good framework and podcast funnel, like how it should all look, that is just going to give you a really good foot out there. And it's really going to give you and open up all the doors to major success and opportunities. So over the past, I would say about a year now, I've been helping other entrepreneurs and businesses structure, set up, and strategically plan out podcasts. And it's not something that I set out to do. It's just that was one of my tasks amongst many of these companies and entrepreneurs was, we all need a podcast. What do we need to do? And I said, okay, well, let's figure this out. So after a while of setting out and doing these things and structuring different podcasts, I found out there are certain things that made podcasts work, and there's other things that make podcasts really stand out, right? Things that work for business and things that just help you stand out to grow that audience. And so I started picking the pieces out and going, what really is going to work? And I came up with a framework and a funnel for your podcast. And we're going to talk about that in just a little bit. But first, I want to say this. Listen, I thank you guys so much for being a part of this podcast. And I'm really excited about season 3 here because I am doing something new with season 3. Besides the whole new branding and new look and all the stuff I've invested in here. But what I'm doing with season 3 is, one, I'm going to be doing live hot seats, right? I'm going to be also bringing on some really awesome guests onto the show. And I'm also planning to give you every single day, or as much as possible, I'm going to try to commit to a daily podcast right here on this show. Yes, crazy as it sounds, I want to give you guys content every day. And that content is just not going to be any content. I want to give you content that you could walk away from going, oh my gosh, I got to apply this to my business right now. So I'm excited about it. So if you're listening to this podcast on my Apple Podcast, Spotify, or Anchor, just know that this podcast is recorded as a video on YouTube. And if those of you guys are watching me right here, right now, what's up? On the YouTube channel. So I'm excited to grow this out with you guys and expand this community. And like always, I still have the Facebook group for the podcast community if you want to dive a little bit deeper and get involved with me there and share some insight and information. So the community is great, and I appreciate you guys. So before we get started on this podcast framework and funnel, let me run today's feature promo.
Have you ever wondered how some podcasts generate leads and cash flow for entrepreneurs and their businesses? Well, I have helped some of the top entrepreneurs put together their podcast framework so that it's fast, efficient, and effective. And if you would like to learn how you can get a hold of the exact framework that I use for my clients and myself, then go to ZebulonThomas.com for more information. ZebulonThomas.com for more information.
All right. So that right there was a sneak peek of the framework and funnel that you can download for free on my website. Yes, at ZebulonThomas.com. It'll be right there. Scroll down and you'll find it. But let's talk about this funnel framework in its entirety and how I set things up. It's how I structure this podcast and many others. In fact, just to share some numbers with you, right? Not the exact numbers. I'm not going to talk about digits as far as like what they made, but they've expanded so much with their numbers, with shares and likes and subscribers and views, right? And also these podcasts that I've helped structured have generated really, really good numbers financially. So this number can be different for any one of you, right? And it's the amount of going from like 0 to 100,000, 2 million, 40 million. It's all on how you set up your podcast, how much you engage, how much of that community build. And so that's what I want to share with you is why this is so important to get this down. And for some of you guys that are just starting out a podcast, or maybe you really haven't committed yet, you did what I did. You're ready for season 3, right? Well, in your case, you're ready for your very first podcast episode, and you've invested all this stuff and equipment. Maybe you got the really good stuff, right? You got the good mics, right? Everything, the great lights, right? And you're like, okay, I just need to hit record now. And you don't know what to do. Well, this framework is going to help you get over that and get you unstuck so that you can say, oh, you know what? I know where to place my episodes and my advertisements or my communication to build the community, or a little cool stuff like sponsors or even how to bring in a guest. So let's get right into it. I have a slide deck I want to show you right here. Let's bring this up. Right here is my podcast funnel and show framework. So if you look at this chart that I've built, what we have here is the first section is the podcast, all right there in white. So this is just your show in general. This is like you've recorded it on a camera and you're bringing it into an editing software and you're getting it ready. Or you're doing what I'm doing here and you're editing this kind of like as you record it in like maybe a software like OBS. So what you have here is once you get the podcast done, where is it going to go? What are the platforms it's going to go on? So right here I have the number one I recommend if you're just starting out is Anchor. Anchor is a really incredible podcast platform. So put this up on Anchor and then from Anchor, obviously it can filter down through Spotify and Apple Podcast and YouTube, of course. But if you look at these, go through the funnel a little bit differently. Your Anchor, your Apple Podcast, and your Spotify will all lead towards a Facebook group. I highly recommend that because it's about building a community. Now, yes, you can throw in here that it's going to represent and get people to go into your Instagram or your LinkedIn or your Twitter. Yes, of course, all that. But your goal here is to set up your podcast so that it goes to your Facebook group. So you can really build that community. And then from there, you can host a series of things. You can have a challenge. And I have challenge on here twice because there could be 2 different challenges. I've done that. But you could have a challenge or you can have a course. You know, like maybe it's like an evergreen micro course. They learn about it in the group. You talk about it in the podcast, they learn about it in the Facebook group, and then it goes into maybe a small challenge or it goes into a full-on, mini course. And then from there, that all leads you into the funnel. Now, these could all be just free events. Your podcast is free. People are listening to it. They go in the Facebook group. It's free. And then maybe they take this challenge and that's free. Or they take the micro course and they just get a little piece of what you're trying to give them, all that value you're trying to add. And then you take them into a funnel. And now from here, this step can go much, much further. Obviously, if you know about funnels goes pretty deep, so you can really go in there. But the funnel is to take them beyond the freebies and go behind a paywall. So this is where and this is a really effective way of how to generate money with your podcast. There's many ways to generate podcasts, have money generated from a podcast. And that could be sponsorships, certain guests, asking people to support your channel and your podcast. But basically, this is really effective because you're giving value, you're leading with education, you're building the community, and then you go, hey, you know what? I have put together this course. Maybe maybe you start out and you don't have any of this, but I recommend just getting the Facebook and stuff set up. Maybe you don't have the challenge or the funnel ready, but you're going to get started and you're going to start talking about stuff to build that community. People start to follow you, and then it might click. You might be like, you know what? I want to teach people how to do something. Maybe it's this one thing that I'm good at. Well, then you start to implement that and you tell them, hey, if I give away, maybe this free challenge or this free course to everyone in my Facebook community group, could you, my podcast community group, could you support this and tell me, would it work for you? Something you'd want. And then you test that. And then once that works, then you go ahead and you build a funnel. And behind the funnel is your full course. Maybe it's automated, or maybe you're actually live teaching it, and you do this 3-4 times a year. So that's just the flow from podcast to the podcast platforms into the Facebook group. Now, if you look and you notice, YouTube is a little bit different. The podcast to YouTube game is going to be different. So you're going to be building your podcast. It goes on YouTube as a video, of course. And your goal there is to get likes, shares, and comments. Okay. And obviously, those likes, shares, and comments, if you're active in the comments and people are sharing your stuff and you give them great value, well, then that is when it's right to ask for subscribers, right? And connect, and you'll gain the subscriptions, right? People aren't going to subscribe to your first video just because you ask them to. If you give them great information and lead with education, or give them some sort of value from your podcast, they're going to be like, hey, you know what? I like this podcast. I'm going to subscribe to it so I don't miss any more. And from there, you build a community inside of YouTube. Okay. So now, I mean, yes, you can direct these people into Facebook group, but people on YouTube, they really want to stay on YouTube, right? So you want to build the YouTube community. Now, of course, you have this subscriber base and people commenting. The difference here is in a Facebook group, you actually see all the people that are in the group and you can interact with them and all this great stuff. As subscribers in the YouTube, you don't necessarily get to see like everybody that's there. Like it's just a big long list of subscribers. Yes, of course you see channels, but a lot of people are behind channels. They're not like, it's not as personal, if you will. So it's not like you're going to really like get down one-on-one with them here, but you can inside of the comment section under your videos. And if you're doing a really, really good job, you start to open that up and have communication. And to me, building a YouTube community is going to be way stronger than a Facebook community. And if you build this right, yes, people are going to trickle over into Facebook to go beyond, especially when you lead that community into a funnel. At this point, you've gained subscribers, you've built up this, program or course or challenge that you're going to offer, and you let people know on a video and go, hey, I'm offering this. If you want to check it out, head on over there and get involved. And you could also, and I should have put an arrow up, but I didn't on this. I want to keep it simple. You can really build this out for you. It's pretty straightforward, but you could also say, hey, I have a free course going on in my Facebook group. And that's how you can get them to jump over there. But if you've done your, communications right and you've really added massive value, it would be easily to just say what you want to say I have this funnel I built out to sell my course. If you want to get involved, check it out, right? And then the community will go and they'll go into your funnel and they'll give you more data feedback from there. So it's really exciting. Now I want to move to the bottom of this chart here. And if you noticed, I have the podcast show framework timeline. So this is the timeline. If you were to lay out this podcast episode on like an editing software, you would see a long audio stream timeline, or a video, if you will. So what I've done here is at the very beginning, I gave you just a little opening. For most people, because I'm not really selling anything on this podcast today, right? I'm just giving you just a really good amount of information. I wanted to let you guys know that this is my first podcast of season 3. And I said, we're going to be talking about setting up a podcast, having that ultimate framework, if you will, or the podcast funnel, if you will. And so that's kind of like my hook, right? And that could go between as short as I just did or up to 1 minute in length. And then right after that, you want to go right into your intro. And you saw that's what I did. And then afterwards, I just went into what I'm talking about here briefly. And then I went into a feature promo, right? But I could have easily, and this is like where something you got to play with what fits in right with you. But if you noticed, the red areas on this timeline, the intro and the end slate, they don't move ever. Your hook is in white because that's fluid. It just kind of flows. It comes from whatever the episode is or what you're talking about. And then the green area is evergreen or it's promotional ads, and it can be moved or taken out. But I like to say if you start a podcast up, it's nice to go with a good hook, got your intro, and then throw in an advertisement. It doesn't have to be an ad with a CTA. It could. I highly recommend a CTA. It doesn't mean you have to make money. It could just be like, hey, yada, 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 and then you're saying go to my Facebook group or follow me on Instagram or like this video. It could be that simple. But make sure you do something that gets them to engage or think about engaging with your content with you on this platform. And then you go into your episode. Whatever this podcast is about, we're going to be talking about, like right now, we're talking about this framework. So that's the white area, and that's the first half. Then you're going to break this up. So say this is a 20-minute podcast. I would cut this at the 10-minute mark. That middle green promotional ad, that's another CTA you want to put in there. Again, it could be, subscribe. So maybe let's just say you don't have anything to sell. You don't have a Facebook group. That first one could be like, hey, if you really like this video, thumbs up this video, right? The second one could be, by the way, I'd love to get your feedback back on what we're talking about here in the episode. Comment below. And then the very last one could actually be your, hey, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. I'd really appreciate your support, right? So that's how I'd put those ads in this. If this is same thing, if it's a short 5-minute podcast, maybe you just remove the front one, right? And you just have one that kind of splits in there. And it doesn't need to interrupt. It's just, it could cut it, at the end of a topic, if you will. But if you have to cut mid-sentence, just make sure you find a really good spot to splice that in. Or do what I'm doing where I kind of have it planned out. I'm going to be cutting into something like that. And then the second half of the podcast here is just you wrapping up all the key points and, just kind of finalizing everything you were talking about and make sure that all leads and gives value at that part. And then the very last promo ad is just, like I said, your subscribe, or if you're selling something, maybe you have multiple products you can place in there, or sponsorships can throw their advertisement in there. And then, of course, you have the end slate. And on the end slate, you do what you want to do, but I would highly recommend having, just your top, not everywhere you're at. Make sure you have subscribe, like, thumbs up. You'll see my end slate in a little bit. I'll play it for you. Well, you'll see it at the end. And then make sure you have, like, maybe, where are you at? Where are you at? Are you on Instagram? See, I'm a big Instagrammer. I love Instagram. So if you want to connect with me, you got to find me on Instagram. Second to Instagram is going to be like my YouTube channel. Third to that's going to be LinkedIn. And then last but not least, I'm going to be on Facebook. Now, yes, I'm on Twitter and all these other places, but if you really want to connect with me and send me a message and try to reach me the best, that's where I'm going to be. And the reason Instagram is number one for me is because it's very easy for me to access Instagram quickly and scroll through and respond. It's just how I interact with that social platform is just so much easier. Some people like Twitter, right? I think Twitter was great at the beginning, but I kind of lost interest because I'm not able to share every ounce of like short videos and things like that on there. I know you can post it, but it's just not easy for me and it doesn't look right. I don't like it. I really like LinkedIn because the way LinkedIn structures and connects to people that you've worked with. And since, my accolades have been growing tremendously over the past 2 years, I've been able to really just grow that out. So that's exciting. And I get to share people on there, a little more business on there. But again, on that end slate, you want to go where you're at and post those up. So maybe post only 3 social media platforms that people can follow you on, okay? And you'll see my end slate is also talking about the Facebook group. So I also have kind of like a generalized, hey, I'm really pushing the Facebook group. If you really want to connect with me, go beyond this podcast and get inside the podcast community group on Facebook, because that's where I'm active. And what's nice about, and I'll get into that a little bit more later on in the season here about talking about what my podcast community group Facebook is all about, because I really get personal in there. And that's just really so I can go beyond what I have here. But again, this timeline can be really anything you want. You could do a 5-minute podcast, make it real quick, and you don't always have to have these ads in there. That's why I've made them green. You can take them all out or you can put them in, but it's nice to break up longer episodes. If you have a full hour episode, maybe it's just you, right? Or maybe you and a co-host, then yes, you can put this in there. You can actually probably double down on this in a full hour. You could probably put more ads, but it still feels right in a full hour podcast with 2 co-hosts or with you and a co-host going through and doing three promo ads, if you will. That's what I'm going to call them. But if you have a guest on, like let's just say you have a 45-minute or a 60-minute show and you have a guest on the show and you're interviewing them, then I would say with that, yes, the 3 breaks are going to be ideal because you're talking, the guest is talking. Maybe you do have a third wheel there. Maybe you have the co-host too, and so you guys are both talking. So it's good to be able to break this up into the 2 halves right? The two sections of your episode, even though it's 60 minutes. Okay. So, like I said, I've built so many podcast frameworks for so many different people, entrepreneurs, companies. And this has kind of been the thing that has just fallen together so nicely. And I've noticed a really nice trend with this and just how it fits and flows. And it's really nice for the person editing this. And since I'm doing my own podcast, I don't have time to do all this editing. So I'm recording this right now and I'm just pushing some buttons, right? And I have everything set up in my OBS software so that when I'm done with this, I can zing it off to my platforms and be done. Or send it over to one of my team members and they'll take care of the rest. But I wanted to make it so simple because I don't want anybody, including myself, tied down behind this podcast. And let me bring it back to me here. And I don't want you tied down behind your podcast. Listen, make your podcast exciting where you're ready to show up, right? You've got all this stuff. You got a room picked out. You got some lights, you got your camera set up, and you're like, I want to sit down and do this podcast. So maybe this is something you build out in your home, your office, or somewhere, and you make it simple. So you just sit down and do this. And we're going to talk a little bit about that when we return. And this is my promo ad, so I'm going to share it with you right now. Let's go.
Oh yeah, let's think back. Okay, it's 1980s and there's no internet, but you hold the knowledge of today's marketing and technology. What are you going to do with it? Go out there and change the world. That's how you need to think right now. That's the feeling. Chase that. Nothing can stop you. Be ambitious, be courageous, and be creative. This time it's new, it's now, and it's yours. Go for it. You got this. This is brought to you by Think Like a Strategist podcast.
There we go. There we go. See? Okay. I had not unmuted my button. That happens. I was just saying, when I cut to this screen, let me bring it back to you real quick. This right here is my second ad. I just got done doing my second ad, as you can see in the timeline here. And now I'm talking to you about the second half of the episode. So what I was saying when I didn't unmute my mic, because I was saying how excited I am about OBS and how I might be sacrificing a few quality things. I'm not sure what, because I have my mic set up right. I have all the system settings just spot on that works. So I don't know exactly what I'm missing out on versus when I used to traditionally do this, and that was I would record all this on this camera, and then I would take it out and I'd go on the computer, and then all these little micro ads I'd have to put in here and edit, and I'd spend hours doing that. And if you don't want to get stuck behind spending hours editing, then follow that framework and maybe look into setting yours up on OBS so you can do this as you go. And the reason I'm going to leave this section in here where I didn't have my mic on, because I'm not perfect. None of this is perfect. That's what makes the podcast so exciting, is I'm taking you guys on a journey. If you guys have been with me for a long time through season 1 and season 2, you know I've tried a lot of different things. And when I was doing my own podcast, right, you know that I've shared with you my journey to make this better and better through buying the different microphones, testing out the different video settings or even audio settings, taking you on the road with me, doing the podcast in a car, at the park, like all those things. I've taken you on my journey, and I highly encourage you guys to go back if you're new here and browse through season 1 and season 2. Just see what you want. Now, this is where I'm more on YouTube with season 3. So all the other episodes are mainly on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Anchor, right? So, and I do want to say this, if you're just starting out, remember I mentioned Anchor? Anchor is a really good free source to plug in and start a podcast. What I like about Anchor is it started for me when I didn't have all the extra equipment. I didn't have the mics for podcasting per se. You know, I do video, so I had all this stuff for video. And I was like, man, I had this one microphone that hooks. It was a shotgun mic by Rode, and it hooks to my cell phone. And I was like, man, I should hook that up. And before I did, though, I found out, well, let me just test Anchor out, because they claim that, you know, you can record a good podcast on your phone. So that's what I did. I had my phone and I would just turn it on. I'd hit record and I'm like, blah, 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 blah. Maybe I'm at the park, and I noticed that when I was in a car, because it's like a built-in studio, right? So if you ever want to really get that really good sound where there's not a lot of reverb, get inside a car, make sure it's not turned on, right? And record your podcast straight to your phone. Through Anchor, it sounds incredible. And then I went ahead and attached the shotgun mic from Rode onto my phone, and that was just nice, clean audio. In fact, all these ads that you hear, were recorded on that shotgun mic with my phone. I still do that to this day. Even though I got all these crazy expensive microphones, I still use that to this day. In fact, if I could turn the camera around, right, you would see that I have a foam wall built up with foam on the ceiling and foam on the walls. I have a microphone, which is that Rode shotgun mic that hooks to my phone, sitting inside another foam-like barrier. It's like a little case that goes around it. And I just set my phone up and I plug it in. And that's where I do all my voiceover, all my podcast episodes for myself, my ads for other people's podcasts. Anything spoken, I do it right there because that shotgun mic sounds so good. And I use like a Rode app, or I could easily use my Anchor app. So that is why I like Anchor so much, because you can set it really fast. There's not a lot to have to plug in and do. You don't have to tech savvy to do this. And you put it all together and then you just connect it. Maybe you have to do a little bit of research, but there's some helpful articles on Anchor that show you how to set up your podcast with Apple and get it to distribute to Spotify and all that good stuff. You could pick out so many different platforms from there. And then I just upload it there and boom, it's ready to go. And I just love it. So again, getting back to you not getting stuck behind editing and you not getting stuck behind trying to be perfect on the podcast. Look, it's okay. Like the beginning of this video, there's a known thing that I remember I didn't do when I started this. And hopefully it's okay, right? I have to go back and check this out. But if I don't put, like I have a hold screen. I'm going to show you this hold screen right here. This is my hold screen. You can still hear me. My mic is not muted. So if I don't put this hold screen up before I hit record on my OBS and bring it in, sometimes my camera gets a little pixelated, right? Because I'm still learning all the tech stuff inside of here on my own system. Yes, I built this out for other people, and we had all types of different incredible system build outs, the Rodecaster with all these other things. And it's just incredible what you can do. But most of the time we're building this thing out in OBS, and that's exciting, right? Or using something else, another type of platform that works, or software that you can plug into. And this is also good for going live. So I highly recommend, maybe I'll do a video on this, but there's a lot of great helpful videos out here about setting up OBS to do a podcast. So I just looked that up on YouTube, right? And you'll find someone who's way better than me at that. I'm just the strategy guy now, right? I'm the guy who says, hey, these ideas might work. Let me show you how to do this. Or I build the graphic out. I'm like, oh, this would be a cool ad. I obsess over these little micro pieces that go in there. And you can hear that. One, in my voice. Two, you can see it in the content. And you can hear it in the content in what I'm doing when I'm doing my ads. When you think about advertisement, it doesn't always have to mean you have to have a product. Advertise that you want to communicate with people. You want to build a community. That's what I want to do, right? And that's what 99% of the podcasters out there, in fact, really just social media in general, if you want to grow your business, if you want to expand your market, you have to build that community. Without a community, without an email list, you're not going anywhere, okay? It's going to be very, very hard to climb the top. So build that email list by leading with value and education, and build the community. And when you build it right, if you're doing things right, you're going to have a community that's responsive, that's going to be communicating with you. They're going to engage with you. It's going to be great. You're going to get a lot of feedback, and you're going to build some close-knit friends and in this community, and you're going to all just keep leveling up. It's going to be great, right? And then they're going to support you just as much as you support them. Now, you could do the one thing that I did, which I had to figure this out before listen, the crazy thing about it, my journey, and I share this with you guys, is when I started out as a videographer, and I was wearing all the hats. So I learned all these different things over the 15 years of my career, right? Just doing all these different things, like with businesses and companies, and like working with some of the best top experts and strategists and marketers and directors, all these different people, right? Over the years, I learned a lot, which made me really, really good at what I do. And then I realized when things shifted, if you know what I mean, recently, over the past 2 years, the market shifted, and we all had to forcefully do other things. We had to figure things out. I was like, man, and then I get called upon by people that I look up to as a head key strategist. And I realized that's what I am at my core. I know I love video, but man, I'm a strategist because I have that creative brain, right? I can't stop thinking about the ideas that could really expand on people's lives and their businesses. And so when I started doing this, I found myself, getting placed here. How can I micromanage these ads, or what can you do for the business bottom line? What you could do to make these numbers work better? What about events and shows? What about graphics? Like, you name it. And then amongst all that stuff, right? It was podcast. It was like Zoom and it was like podcast. And I was like, okay. And then it was also courses. And to me, it's like podcast, it's courses. Those two things are really, really exciting when you really build them out. So with that being said, I started to think about these things and going, well, what can I do to give this great information on season 3 of my podcast? So I went back and I changed everything from my podcast. And that's why I'm sitting here on this futon. I got some nice pillows right here, right? And I painted this crazy thing on the wall. And I got these little lights and I'm excited. And I'm like, the whole setup is different. And I'm using OBS. Because I was like, you know what? I want to have fun. I want to set up this environment. So like when I'm have a really busy day, I'm like really slammed, which my days are crazy busy, but it's exciting because I work with so many incredible people and their teams, right? And so I can't help but like take notes and be like, all right, I'm going to talk about this. And that's what I'm delivering for you guys here on this podcast. And so when I get done with all that, yeah, the worst thing you do is say, I'm so pooped at working out for so many other people or someone else's company that you don't spend time on you, on yourself, and you grow your own brand and your own community. So that's why it's important to set up your podcast. And it doesn't have to be this crazy. I mean, you can get even, trust me, I've seen the screens. I built them out, right? The big screens on all the walls and you got 20 monitors. It's insane. And all these wires, right? You don't have to go that crazy. I went a little bit on the easy side here. Microphone, some computers. I got a few set up right here that you don't see, but yeah, I have a screen, a computer, a laptop. Everything's running this show right now. Multiple mics just in case one fails, okay? You don't have to go that crazy. You can literally just, like I said, do an anchor podcast or just set up a camera, talk into it. But here's where you're going to get into time-consuming things. If you don't learn to structure your podcast, use the framework that I showed you. Maybe just start with the framework right here. Just start with that bottom timeline. Look at that and go, how do I fill in the blank? Just do that. And then from there, once you get your first episode done, then go back up to the top and go, okay, because you got to record your episode first before you even put it on Anchor. You can't just set up Anchor and have a show. I mean, you can, but it's kind of backwards. Do the show and then put it up on Anchor. Start there, and that'll trickle down after a week or so into Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and you're good to go. And then if you wanted to do the video, boom, you got on YouTube. Then start the channel, right? But start at the bottom, and then you can build out everything else in this chart. This is a very simple startup chart. It's nothing too intense, okay? So that's what I want you to do is start there. And I don't want you to get caught up behind editing, because if you do, that's when it's like, oh, when I'm done with this, I got to edit it and yada. Right? The thing I'm noticing here on OBS, I'm going to talk to you about that in just a second. See, now I'm going to get to this third ad here. See how I did that? Right? I'm going to bring right in the third ad. It's a nice little promo break. But I want to talk to you about the last but not least thing of what I'm experiencing with OBS. And I want to share with you how I'm going to approach this and fix that as well. Here we go. You're listening to. This is the Think Like a Strategist podcast. I'm your host, Zebulon Thomas. Let's go. Listen, if you truly want to take your business to the next level, then I highly recommend getting involved in my Facebook group and asking the questions that you need strategic answers to. And if you're active enough, you might even gain access to a secret mastermind group. Shh, don't tell anybody. See you in the group. And now listen, I wasn't really paying attention, so I might have played the ad twice. Was that the same ad? I got my my one group icon on. I'm going to manually just turn this off. And there's that. So I'm not sure which ad I played. I think I hit 4 and I should have hit 5, but it's okay. You're going to hear as the episode roll out. I still haven't made my chart, and there's a thing called Stream Deck. It's really exciting. It just hasn't come yet. I'm going to be doing that. So I'm using the keys on my computer and laptop. It's really fun. Like I built this all out and it looked kind of crazy, but it works, right? So there we go. But listen, the one thing that I want to say that with this OBS software that I'm experiencing is I wish there was a master volume, right? We have all these volume levels. I spent hours and hours setting this up. Listen, I'm not going to lie to you. When you set up your podcast, if you're going to go and use OBS or anything really, you're going to need to spend a couple days practicing. And I don't mean perfecting. I just mean, set your camera up. How does that angle look? Take some time and it makes yourself look good. And make sure your settings on your camera is good, right? Make sure your audio is picking up. Make sure the mouth matches the video. Make sure things are working and flowing. And prepare for things like what happens if the battery on the camera dies? What are you going to do, right? Do you have a backup battery? Throw it in. What happens if you have technical problems with your mic? The show must go on. Are you going to switch to the camera on the mic on the camera? Are you going to switch to a laptop? Are you going to pull out your phone and say, I'm not doing video, I'm just going to do this on a phone, right? Again, you got to be able to switch to this. And it's not always about doing quality. Like, of course I want quality on here, but I can't always have that, right? Because I'm just I need to get you guys the information. So one of the things with OBS is because they don't have a master volume, I would like everything that has been leveled to then feed into a master volume that has a series of maybe compressors or limiters on it. And you don't want to go too much. I don't like the sound of like the tin can or like all the electrical jargon that happens when you have a noise gate or something on there. You have to really tweak that. And if you don't know what you're doing, it's going to be tough. You're going to sound like a garbage can. You're in kind of robot voice, or it's going to cut out a lot. So you really got to know what you're doing if you're going to do that. So with me, when I'm done with this podcast, the only editing that I have as of right now, whether it's me or someone on my team, is I'm going to take this file and then I'm going to normalize it, or I'm going to level it, or I'm going to add a LUF to it so it sounds really, really good on the podcast for the audio, right? For the visuals, it's going to be okay. But if anything, for the visuals on YouTube, I at least want to bring the volume up. Now, know that a lot of these platforms already have a compression built in that'll lower or raise the audio sound file when you upload it to the platform. And that can really make your content like sound bad. So you want to get these things called LUFs. You want to find the right LUF. So I use a LUF -16, and that's kind of my go-to, right? And you can find this inside of different applications, or you can do it inside of a software, or I didn't mean applications. I mean like inside software, like editing softwares. Where's the first time I had the LUF? I think the LUF for me, I forgot what program I was using. I think it might have been the Rode Connect. Yes, it was my Rode Connect. Had a LUF feature, and I learned about it there. I was like, oh, this is crazy. This is good. And it basically just gives you audio that isn't too loud, too quiet, so that on that platform, when you listen to someone else's podcast, maybe you're listening to someone that's really popular and they got a really good podcast, like high level production. And then you got you on your phone over here, right? When they jump from that to this, the quality might be a little bit different, but the volume is going to be the same, right? So if you have the right LUF and right settings, everything's going to be just smooth sailing, right? You don't want people reaching, turn up the knob or turn up their phone or whatever they're blowing out their eardrums in a set, headset or something like that. You don't want that, okay? So that's basically what I'm looking at with my platform here and my software and everything I'm trying to build out. But what I did do is I just got excited. I started visualizing what I wanted season 3 to be about. Now listen, I should have started season 3 a long time ago with you guys, but a couple things happened, right? My career got crazy busy, right? I shifted, I pivoted, I got working with some mentors of mine, some people that I looked up to, and next thing I know, I'm like just dealing with some insane opportunities that really led to some great business growth. And I've grown, I've learned so much. And in the meantime, as much as I wanted to share along that journey, I got too busy. And I realized that, man, the way I had my podcast set up, it was just taking too much time for me to do. And when you're doing all the stuff that I was doing, it was just hard to be able to do that. And then at the same time, I was like, I want to share, but I'm a little burnt out. So I took a break, and the whole time I started thinking, what do I want? And I started piecing all these things together. And I said, well, let's just do this. And then a good friend of mine I was talking to, he said, you know what? I want to hold you accountable. We need you to launch. Like, do it, set a date. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to set that date. So I can't thank you enough, right? My friend. And just like, boom, he's like, did you launch? I'm like, I'm doing it right now. And I was. And I had all these technical issues. And I was like, all right, let me go back to testing. But don't stay in the testing mode too long. I had to go back to testing because I want to make sure that if I'm going to sit down here and spend a little bit of time with you, and I give you this information, that I didn't mess it up, didn't miss it, right? Besides the time that in this podcast I went mute, right? I just hit the mute button. It happens. So other than that, guys, listen, I'm so excited to have season 3, the first launch. This is my 100th episode. Yes, I did hit 100th episode, probably like 3 different times. And I don't mean like I hit it 300 times. What I'm saying is like I had 3 episodes that technically were episode 100, but I pulled them down because they just didn't line up. The count was off. Actually, it had nothing to do with the quality of the episode. The episodes were good, and I might still share them. I ended up sharing them in the Facebook group, but I pulled them down because somewhere when I started doing this, I realized that I was naming them episode like 2 on Anchor, but it was only registering as episode 1 on Apple. So I was like, how do I get that to line up right because the number's wrong because Apple actually tells you what episode that is. So be mindful of that. Make sure you get your episode the way it should be from the beginning, right? And you'll be good. So I'm going to go ahead and I want to play Ad 5 on here just because I like how it sounds. And I want to give you guys ideas for when you're recording some kind of promo ad, right? Whether it's a call to action or if it's just something you want to plug and put it in there. So I want to play that real quick and we'll be right back.
You're listening to. This is the Think Like a Strategist podcast. I'm your host, Zebulon Thomas. Let's go. Listen, if you truly want to take your business to the next level, then I highly recommend getting involved in my Facebook group and asking the questions that you need strategic answers to. And if you're active enough, you might even gain access to a secret mastermind group. Shh, don't tell anybody. See you in the group.
And there you have it, right? So get excited about building out these little micro ads. And I'll let you in on a little secret here, right? For me to do these things on this podcast show, like to get those ideas, all I did is since I had my YouTube channel, since this is going on YouTube, I just went in the audio library in your YouTube channel. So if you go under like your YouTube studio, see audio library, and you just go through and find some really cool tracks that you like, that sounds good, that's good for YouTube, right? It's all free to use there. And you find one and then get creative. Like, all right, so then I sat down and I wrote down like ads. I was listening to music. I'm like, oh, I really like this part. Or maybe you play DJ and you take this part and you cut off the back and you line it up and you make a little 30-second spot. And then you write to it and you go, man, what do I want? Get creative with the writing. I am driven by something else. I like video games, like things like that. So there's a theme that I build off of and I like that energy. And so I share that in there because I want you guys to enjoy this listening. Right? I want you to enjoy when you show up here. Not just, yes, you're getting information and hopefully it's helpful for you. But at the same time, I want you to like enjoy this. Like, this is really cool. I like this. I want you to geek out over that, if you will. And so also I want to let you know something else that I found myself doing with my episode 1 and episode 2 is I built a community, which I love everyone that's part of my community now. You guys are great. But at the very beginning, you're going to have your friends and family's going to support you. They're going to jump in. But I'm telling you what, you don't want your friends and family in your podcast community group, okay? You just don't, okay? Because then you end up getting like this just mixed community. And the thing about that is when you actually say, hey guys, I'm doing this, or hey, you want this, and you got people that are confused, or maybe they're not communicating. So if you don't have a lot of interaction in your group, it's because the topics you're sharing doesn't align with the viewers, right? With the people inside that community group. So, and of course, the friends and family, they're too busy and they're not going to buy into anything I'm doing, right? So they're not going to really engage in that. And some of the stuff that I talk about is more like fitness and personal. Maybe it might hit a little close to home. So like friends and family, like, hey man, like I'd love to work out with you today, but you're a little insane, right? Or man, you have all this freedom to do whatever you want to do and all this stuff like that, and I have to work all day. Well, it's how you set up your life. It's how you structure things, right? And this is just happened to be what I do. But then when I see them, they're all like talking about work and stuff. So it's one of those things where just don't have the friends and family inside your community, okay? It's nice to have that nice support, but at the very beginning, it's nice for them to give you that push so that when people start to see it, they go, oh, there's so many people in this group, I'm going to join, something's happening. But don't forget, people are following your journey. And so people come in and see that you have nobody in the group. It's just you. And they go, I get to be the first one in this group. I'm going to be your number one fan, okay? So there's nothing wrong with that. Don't feel like you have to have all these numbers. Listen, the one thing I've learned over countless episodes generating money and business and leads and lead generations and email list and then community and sponsors, like they just build out, right? And opportunities. But the one thing I will say this that I heard so exciting, and it's from Steve Larson, right? Steve Larson said, hey, you can't cash likes. Right? So again, it's not about the numbers. It's not about the likes, right? It's about adding massive value, building a community, and having a mission of what you're trying to accomplish here. Don't just get on here and ramble off, right? You're getting on your podcast because your podcast is an extension of you. It's an extension of your business, and it can open the door for your financial freedom and unlimited abilities and opportunities to go take life and live it fully out. I can't tell you just how much this is a nice gateway to open up the door for you to communicate with someone halfway around the world, or a leader, an expert, a brand, a business, a cause, a charity, right? a friend, bring new friends in, or even open the door for people to support your business or product or service or a course, ideally, right? It's exciting. So this podcast, just figure out what you want. If you don't know what you're doing at the beginning, that's okay. You share the story because people go, dang, if they can do that, I kind of like this. I like watching this person grow. Everyone's watched me grow. Listen, people call me an expert at a lot of things right now, right? And I'm humbled by that. But I'm not perfect on my own podcast, right? It's okay. Because here's the thing. I can help people if they already have the motor running, right? I can talk to you and get you to take action and be motivated. Like, I'm just going to do this, and you can run through a wall and be unstoppable. But at some point, you got to keep going. You can't always have me pushing you. And then when you get the motor running, maybe you come back around. I'm like, oh, you created something really cool. And now I know how to expand on that because you already got that going. See, that's just how I work, right? So I'm humbled by being able to work with so many different people. But at the core, I'm not perfect. Nobody is, right? And that's why I'm sharing with you my vulnerability, my journey on this channel and inside my community group. Because again, I realized that I had a community that wasn't really responsive, right? And so I'm building that in season 3. I'm like, you know what? I'm doing this for all these other people. I got to be able to do it for me. You ever have that? You're like, how did I just give this information? And they just went off and just exploded business. But that same information just didn't work for me. That same idea. Because it's not always meant for you, right? And so that's where I'm in a position right now where I really love this opportunity I'm at because, heck, I can experiment with my own life and my own, things that are going on, my own businesses and opportunities. And I can test here because what I'm doing for other people is working and it's incredible. And I'm like, what? Right? So I'm building all the pieces together. I'm building the best of the best. And the framework I'm sharing with you right here. You're seeing this live as we roll out season 3. So subscribe, right? Here I go. I'm going to ask you for this. Subscribe, like, share, and subscribe, and comment below if you like this video on YouTube. And if you're listening to this, I would love for you to head over to Facebook and join my community group, right? And I think it's still called the Zebulon Thomas Podcast Community Group on Facebook. I think that's the URL. I've made a lot of changes. The fastest way to do it is just go to ZebulonThomas.com, and you'll see a link to the community there. And also, I'm showing the podcast framework right now. If you're listening to this, you can download this on my website. If it's not there, I will post it inside the group, okay? So for those of you guys who are listening to this, you're probably like, what is he talking about? He showed this slide deck and I didn't see it. I heard about it. I do apologize because I just realized that when I did that, I wasn't prepared for that. See, there's my vulnerability. I should have shown you or explained a little bit more of that framework that we're looking at right here. And I didn't, but basically you'll have to go to the Facebook group and you'll have to check it out. So this is a nice opportunity. So those of you guys who are listening and watching this right now, if you have that and you're like, well, how do I explain something on my podcast if I'm showing on video, but how I explain it to the viewers? What if I forgot to do that? Then a simple rule of thumb is just say, hey, if you want to see what we showed, check out the YouTube video, first of all. Go watch this on YouTube so you can see what we're talking about. And if you, some reason you're not getting on YouTube, then just jump in the community group and you're going to get access to this. So again, it's been awesome talking to you guys and bringing the first episode of season 3. Thank you so much for your support, and I will talk to you soon. Take care.
All right, this episode is over, but we are just getting started, and I'm looking forward to sharing even more creative secrets with you in the next episode. Stay tuned. And if you got something you want me to check out, head over to the Facebook group and post it up. I'd love to see it. Thank you for tuning in. Take care.